anyway. And as with most stories, this one has a before and an after. This is the before. You'll know when we get to the after. It's the summer. You'll remember the summer better than I do. It might be even still sort of normal for you. Strange sunburns. An improvised sun hat made of newspaper and a plastic bag. Seagulls stealing your lunch right out of the call box. Sticky chins. A warm cheese sandwich. Donkey rides. Punch and Judy, remember that? A jigsaw of strangers lying on their fronts, their backs, their sides, in the shade, in the full glare of it, all lying next to each other. Sand on the towel, sand in your eyes, sand in your hair, sand in your mouth, stinging cold salt water to wash it all off. A warm kiss on a hot tummy. The people in the town know that things are changing. The people in the town prefer to look away. The people in the town don't want to think about what's next. Everybody skirts the subject and no one ever really talks at all. She knew this town like the back of her hand. She could tell you every shop on the old high street, every ride on the front, every game in the arcade. She could walk down the pier with her eyes shut and stop one step from the end. She could tell a holiday maker from a mile off. It's the shoes. Then there's the locals. Those people that a town like this would feel empty without. The man that sits whittling on the bench all day long. That old lady that nicks bottles of Jack Daniels in her mobility scooter. The kids that throw bangers at cars, and the girls pushing prams on the sand. People you don't know are missing until years after they've gone. People that make all the difference, but the difference you can't quite put your finger on. People like Brian, the ice cream man. He's the very last one, it turns out. They think he's been here most of his life. He looks like he's always been old. It's pushing lunchtime. It's summer, like I said. He's propped up against the van, whistling, waiting to say hello, twiddling his whiskers, face to the sun with his eyes closed. It's promising to be just another ordinary day in paradise. She's been loitering for a while. Noisy, nosy, no good, smoking fags, kicking a carrier bag in the wind. He can see her out of the corner of his eye. He nips off for a wee while it's quiet. It's easy to get in trouble round here. It's your future you're messing up. I get that all the time. People say it as if I don't already know. They've got nothing, literally nothing on me. I was just minding my own business. I thought I'd do a no comment like they do in 24 hours in police custody. Just stay calm, give them nothing. I'm innocent. That's why I refused a lawyer. Didn't need one. Frankly, if he weren't even pressing charges, I don't get all the fuss is about. Surely they got better things to do. They're small town coppers though, so probably not. Happy to waste their time listening to the testimony of an innocent woman. Well, they didn't get it. I gave nothing away like the husband in Broadchurch. I was at college. That's my alibi. I wasn't there, I was at college. I don't know why the teacher can't vouch for that, but what I do know is that they don't take the register. Surely that's a breach of health and safety. Perhaps that's a separate issue, but perhaps they should be looking at them rather than wasting their time with me. I know what people think about me, but I'm really not that sort of person. I forgot that the husband in Broadchurch gets caught. Bess Malone, 24, was found guilty of low-value shoplifting. Is it shoplifting if you take it from a van? After after breaking into Brian's superwhip on the seafront on Tuesday. Police have dubbed the crime one of the easiest cases to solve in the town's history after it was discovered that a video had been uploaded to Miss Malone's public Instagram account, documenting the consumption and theft of several variations of ice cream. Always wanted to be in the paper. People around here have always said that I'm troubled. But if you ask me, this place has got enough problems of its own without worrying about me. When my college found out, they sent me packing. Said I'd be a bad influence on the younger ones if I stayed. I didn't really like college the first time I tried it, or the second. But this time was supposed to be different. I thought if I went back with a bit of life experience, I'd have got a load smarter and things would be a piece of cake. But as usual, wrong again. I don't like sitting still or things that are boring, and that's basically the whole thing. I get all this pent-up energy and I can't focus. When I was younger, they gave me someone who sat next to me in my exams to try and help me, but I hated her and had this full-on meltdown and she refused to come back. Now this whole thing with the ice creams. Probably a good job they kicked me out. I'm a good worker. I've had loads of jobs. I worked at the swimming pool for a bit. Too smelly. Then I worked at the doctor's surgery for a bit. Just on the phone, was nothing important. That was too smelly as well. And then I got a job at the old folks' home. But that didn't last long for obvious reasons. I make my own way these days. In the summer, this place floods with tourists. God knows why. And I'm always on the lookout for a way to make a bit of cash off them. Carrying their bags from their cars or showing them how to get to the footpath. That sort of thing. I tell them, it's lucky you ran into me. I've been here all my life, there's not much I don't know. If they're daft enough to think this place is a holiday, then they're fair game in my opinion. The day it happened, it was red hot, proper roasting. And everyone was just lying on their backs on the seafront. I weren't loitering or hanging around like the paper says. There's this big old tree in the middle of the square and I was using it for shade while I scoped out my next business opportunity. And that's when I saw him. He was just staring into space, twizzling his whiskers, doing sweet nothing from what I could tell. And before I know it, he's left the van to go nip off for a wee or something. I can see it's unlocked. And like I said, it's boiling hot. And my legs just start walking over there. It must have been heat exhaustion or delirium or something like that. I didn't know what I was going to do when I got there, and then curiosity got the better of me. Nipped in for a look, maybe just a mini milk on the sly. It was all too overwhelming. I legged it when I saw him coming back, but it turns out he knew my name somehow, and a few hours later there was a knock on my front door. They thought I was trying to nick his cash flow, but I'm not like that. If they'd given me community service over it, I'd have taken it on the chin. I don't mind getting my hands dirty. I've cleaned enough toilets to last me a lifetime anyway. I wouldn't have minded a bit of litter picking. I actually think it always looks quite fun with those little pincher things. You're just walking about, pinch, pinch, have a little sandwich, pinch, pinch, cup of coffee, pinch, pinch, job done. No luck. The magistrate called me a nuisance in the community. They didn't write that in the paper. They also didn't write that Mr. Superwhip himself was at the court. Brian's his name. He stood up like he prepared a speech. Sob story, more like. He said that there's only 2 of them left in the country, him and some other bloke. That all the rest of them stopped years ago, got out while they could when the beaches started disappearing. He said that they're a dying trade, that he's rarer than the rarest diamond. He asked if instead of the regular community service, I'd be allowed to help him patch up the van before the real tourist season hits. Maybe even serve a few ice creams. The cheek of some people. I begged the magistrate to let me go round repainting the bins or pick up rabbit carcasses off the roundabout. The more I protested, the more she thought it was a good idea. He smiled as if he'd done me a favour. But if he really wanted to do me a favour, he could have let me get away with it in the first place. week goes by, but it feels like all 4 seasons have passed through the town. She wore a vest and shorts at her court appearance, and on the way out she stood in a massive puddle and got the bus home with soaking feet. The people in the town enjoy a bit of gossip. The people in the town need a distraction from the weather. The people in the town start to change their expectations. The rain stops, and everyone rushes back outside again. Funny, lumpy bodies paddling side by side. A cacophony of harmless screams. The tiptoe walk, dodging sharp little rocks and bits of plastic. Seaweed and ice lolly wrappers merge and float past. An old man spectates the scene, hands behind his back. A kid screams something. The old man nods. He hasn't heard. Doesn't matter. The orange swash is fully warmed. Body temperature. Faded plastic stains scrapes the rocks. Mum's gone to have a rest in the car. Sun tired. On her first day, she turns up 2 hours late. Brian says nothing. He hands her a bucket of soapy water and they clean the van in silence on his driveway, her jaw clenched the entire time. He drives them to a big discount store 2 towns over and they load up the freezer, still silent. When they get back to town, she puts on the white coat he's just bought her, ready to work. He takes off his shoes and socks, rolls up his trouser legs and paddles in. A big wave splashes him up to his knees and he laughs. She stands with her arms crossed on the dry sand, muttering swear words under her breath. He waves and waves and waves. She eventually waves back just to make him stop. She hasn't been this close to the sea since she was a kid. She doesn't like to come down here if she can help it. It's different than she remembers, but she can't put her finger on it. She'll look back at this time so differently to now. She'll come to know that these were the finest of days. This weather, this strange old man, this life. Funny how things come to an end. I can't do this for 2 weeks straight. I'll launch myself off the pier. I smell like sweat and bad milk. I'm knackered. And Brian hums all day long. It's hot and cold in there at the same time. The sound of the metal banging when you open the freezer sets my teeth on edge. He asked if I wanted driving home, but I thought I was going to chunder from the smell, so I just said I'd walk. He insisted it was no problem, so I told him, I love walking. I hate walking. You only like walking if you're posh. It's not fun if you've got to do it. It only took us half a day to get the van ready, and then we were straight out onto the beach to start serving. He said, now how we work together, I can help myself to whatever I like from the freezer, whenever I like. I told him if I want one, I'll buy one for myself. I've got money, I just don't waste it on kids' stuff like ice creams. He ate at least 5 today. They can't be his real teeth. He's so old. I don't get how he's still working. He's deaf as a lamppost, mind you. I told him loudly, so he knew he'd heard me, that fair's fair, and I don't mind doing my bit of unpaid labour, but I can't be starting any earlier than lunchtime. It's my body clock, there's nothing I can do about that. Your own time, of course, he said. Whatever hours you want to keep, you keep those. I'll just be here going round and round. You'll know where to find me. Well, he hasn't got a phone, so I don't know what he meant by that. It'd be really hard to try and find him. My nan told me he was a looker back in the day, but I do not want to think about that. When Brian drives through town, people wave and smile. Even people I've never seen smile in their lives. Everyone's pleased to see him. Their faces change when they see me. Tourists clutch their bum bags a little tighter. That old bat that bound me from the chippy came in this morning for a sneaky pre-work whippy. Face like she'd seen a ghost when I popped my head out the hatch. Brian must have seen all sorts. I asked him, but he cream man never tells. He's deep, Brian. He says loads of things that sound ridiculous at the time, but then when I'm at home in the shower washing all the stickiness off, I think, do you know what? He's right about that. He's like the Dalai Lama of ice cream. He asked me, when was the last time I saw a blackberry in a bush? He said it's been years. I thought I'd just grown up a bit, stopped looking. But then when he said it and I started to look, he was right. They used to be everywhere. And now it's just the ones in the supermarket, the size of grapes, all plump and perfect looking. There was nothing like getting one of those dense little ones from deep in the hedge and not knowing if it would be sweet and juicy or hard and sour or if it'd have a worm in it. Brian says the worms have gone further underground too, but I'm not about to go digging to see if he's right about that one. I'll take his word for it. Sometimes he just stops what he's doing and says, listen, and goes completely still. But I never hear what he's hearing. I think it must be the buzz from the knackered old speakers. Or maybe he's got tinnitus from that horrible droning, plinking, plonking, screeching music. I told him, if you just let me be in charge of the tunes, we get way more customers. But Brian says that's not the point. It's tradition. We play the old songs, and he dances to them like my dad used to in the kitchen when Elvis came on the radio. Like it's the best thing he's ever heard. They were in my dreams last night. I feel like they've gone right in my brain and curled up and gone to bed in there. I don't think I'm ever going to get those tunes out of my head. She never did. She never does get those songs out of her head. Sometimes they're soothing. Sometimes they remind her of better days. Sometimes they're like an alarm bell, warning her of what's coming next. Not many people know this, and who would need to, but there is very strict government legislation from the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs on the code of practice on noise from ice cream vans. Brian was never really opposed to anything, but he was a vocal opposer of this legislation. He tried everything he could think of, petitioning, protesting, he even drove his van to Parliament to try to speak to the Prime Minister, but nothing worked. Now, an ice cream van may only play its tunes for a total of 12 seconds every 2 hours at a noise level not exceeding 80 decibels. It is also illegal to play the tunes outside of the hours of noon and 7 o'clock in the evening, and music must not be played unless upon approach or arrival at the destination. So those 12 seconds every 2 hours became sacred to Brian. He'd close his eyes, take a breath, and press the button on the Harmony 64 on the dashboard. Teddy Bear's Picnic, Yankee Doodle, Three Blind Mice, Green Sleeves, Oh Solly Mio. Years later, she thought maybe it was a rain dance, a weather dance, a hold out a bit longer dance. When she was old, she realised he probably just liked dancing. One day, much later, she'll discover you can look up the different sounds the ice cream vans used to make on YouTube, and she'll find herself on a particularly melancholy day, hanging out of the back door with the sun in her face, smoking a cigarette, staring at a patch of burnt grass, in floods of tears, listening to the tune of Match of the Day, wondering what she could have done if she'd listened to him sooner. The people in the town think the weather is more unpredictable than ever. The people in the town don't want to be the ones to say it. The people in the town are worried all the time. Everybody carries on. We have to pay attention to the weather, he said. Us, more than most. It will tell us everything we need to know. But we don't just pay attention to what the weather looks like now, we have to think about later. He says we have to use the weather to get in their heads. What sort of day do they think they're about to have, and how do we serve them accordingly? If it's boiling, English summertime boiling, he says we sell at least 50% more fruit lollies than chocolate ones. And on a bank holiday, it's almost all whippies. Cornetas are good for drizzle, feasts on a rainy Wednesday. He knows exactly who will be where, and when, and what they'll want, and how much we'll sell. We do the park opposite the church on a Sunday. We do half an hour at the local leisure centre when swimming lessons are kicking out. If it's been a slow day, we do the car park after AA meetings, but Brian said we shouldn't get used to that. We do the WI Hall on a Tuesday, bingo on a Friday evening, and the big industrial estate on the edge of town on a Wednesday lunchtime. Everywhere we go, we never leave without a sale. Brian's been watching everyone all this time, just like I have. When you're from a big family, it's easy to get lost in the crowd, and you learn to just listen invisible. Maybe that's what his family's like too. I didn't think there was much else to know about this place, but it turns out there's loads. He's got it all in his head, but I've started writing it down. Brian says the change is in the little things. And he's right. I didn't notice it at first, the rain. I just thought it was bad luck. I listen to the news on my phone, and my nan watches the forecast on the telly. Never used to rain like this in August. He knows I don't like getting up early, so he does the first shift without me. It's only kids skiving school and old folks to serve at that time anyway, so he doesn't really need me. The best time is from 2:30 until 7:30, and that is the mad rush. School kids, people on their last fag break of the day, people milling around getting their last bits for tea. Sometimes we break the rules and play the jingles twice through, and that really flushes them out. People come scurrying from all over the place. They'd rather get served by Brian than by me, but we pretend we don't notice. Today was my last day, and I was sort of dreading it by the time it came round. It's been better than I thought. Sometimes we even get tips. Brian said I could keep them, but I don't need charity. We split them, and I've got chips and a battered sausage for my tea. He asked me where my favourite place to watch the sunset was, and I've never actually seen one. Alright, it's not as tragic as it sounds. The sun rises over the sea, but I'm never awake to see it, and it sets somewhere over the other way. He drove us to the top of the hill and showed me it setting over the town before he drove me home. When we got back to town, he offered me the job. I told him I've got things to do. Places to be, people to see, plans to make. That said, I do have my eye on a new pair of Air Max I saw in the retail park. I think he knew I was going to say yes. I told him, you better pay me at least minimum wage, that just because it's cash in hand doesn't mean I want any funny business. I don't want to end up pulling Mr. Whippies for life, but it'll do for now. I think he was quite pleased. because even though it was 7:30, he played the Match of the Day song as he drove off down the road. This is a really nice place to leave them. As the sun goes down, orange, yolky, calm. A storm rolled in and stayed for almost 2 weeks. They got their waterproofs out of the back of their cupboards. Rain lashed on their Velux windows. They moved the potted plants off of the driveway back into the porch to try and save them. They can't believe it's August. Not like any August they've known. It's still too hot to sleep at night. Heat lightning hits the big tree in the middle of the square and it splits right down the middle. They clear a path and say they'll keep an eye on it. It's only a matter of time until it falls. Brian knew something was coming before everyone. He knew that something in the air was different. He knew it wasn't his fault that the tulips in his front garden grew stalks but didn't flower. He could see how the ice cream dribbled down their elbows quicker than it used to, and he knew it wasn't because of his refrigerator. He serviced that refrigerator like he was servicing a fighter jet. He showed her how to do it at the end of the last season. She always picked up information like a magpie. She learned how to tie her shoelaces from her brother's football coach when she was 7. She learned counting from the bus driver that took her to school. She learned how to cook pasta from her next door neighbour when her mum started working late. She learned stealing from her nan, but she never did that again after she met Brian. The people in the town start to talk. The people in the town share the same concerns. The people in the town are missing all the same things. Everybody senses it is far too late. The tree falls in the square in the middle of the night. Cider queens, toffee crumble pandas, zoom zaps, fat frogs, feast, original mint, funny face, funny feet, knobbly wobbly, screwball, strawberry split, cornetto, strawberry chocolate, original strawberry chocolate, magnum, chocolate white chocolate almond, maximon, calippo, orange and lime, twister, mini milk, vanilla, strawberry chocolate, Mr. Bubble, Mr. Magic, Mr. Snow, Milky Pop, Solero, Freckle, Topper, Topsy, Dipper, fat! He wouldn't let me get him a birthday present, so I just learned all the ice creams on the board off by heart instead. I thought he was going to cry. He said I could go on Britain's Got Talent with a memory like mine. He asked me if I wanted a double. 2 ice creams in a double cone, but I still don't eat on the job. He made himself one and went and sat on the steps to watch the tide coming in. It used to make me nervous when he'd go like that. But now I know he just needs some space, so I'll keep myself busy and empty the bins or wipe the surfaces until he comes back. Sometimes when he's like that, he lets me show the kids how to do their own. Like he showed me. I get annoyed when they can't do it properly. Not very good at teaching. So he just shows them how to swirl it so it doesn't all leak out. And he lets them do their own sauce, but they always put too much. He doesn't mind. And he says, maybe you'll be an ice cream man one day. But by that time, they're never usually listening to him, so he just waves them off and doesn't charge them. He was showing me how to service the refrigerator when we got the call. He was right about there only being 2 of them left. We led the funeral for the second to last one. We drove all the way to Margate for it. I've never been that far before. There used to be whole lines of us that would go on for hours, Brian said, all blaring their tunes down the main street following the hearse, but eventually they all dropped off. One by one, they all disappeared until it was just us. He said he wanted to be there for the other last ice cream man, and so we went. I'm not very good at long car journeys. I never know how much the passenger's supposed to entertain the driver. Brian was silent the whole way there. I asked him how how long till we got there, but he just pointed at the sat-nav. What was his name again? He just pointed at the funeral invitation on the dashboard. What was his van's name? He shrugged. You ever been to Margate Bry? What will happen to his van? What will happen to his stock? What will happen to his town? Shall I put the radio on? Do you need a tissue? People nodded and patted us on the back when we got there. Brian didn't take his uniform off for the service. He was silent the whole way home as well. I was keen for a few hours of selling when we got back to town, but the sun had gone and there was this crazy rain and wind, and so we packed it in. It's not an all-weather profession as much as we'd like it to be. Even though it's the summer, people just don't want ice creams when it's cold enough to see their breath on the way home from work. Brian says that's the earliest he's ever gone home. Today was the first day I'd gone out on my own. I got a call this morning from a landline number, so I knew it was him before I even answered. He must have the last landline in England. He said he didn't want to push it and he didn't want to ask too much of me, but that he needed the morning off and for me to do the early. Well, he knows my stance on doing anything before lunchtime, so I thought about putting my foot down. But it was a one-off, so I said okay. He said he wouldn't be at home, but the key would be under a big flower pot on his driveway. When I got there, I saw the curtains twitch, and so I knocked, but there was no one at home. Under the flower pot was a key with a key ring I'd never seen before. One of those ones you get on the spinny racks at the tourist shops. It had a sun on it, and a little ice cream, and a chain of beads that spelled out my name. Word went around the town that a piece of the cliff was going to fall into the sea, and so they stationed themselves right there on the seafront to serve anyone that wanted to come and watch it happen. Police cordoned the whole beach off and they served them too. It fell just as the sun went down. People were playing bat and ball on the pier and eating their chips. And then there was a rumble like thunder far away. A eulogy can include anything you think is important. You may want to keep it mostly fact-based, written in chronological order, with a small personal note of remembrance at the end. Or you may want to base it on personal anecdotes and stories that capture the personality of your loved one. People with cameras watched it through their long lenses, and there were reporters there from the local news asking everyone how they felt, and people handing out leaflets talking about what they could do to stop it from happening again. But everyone was too distracted to read them. There was a loud crack, like a big old door opening, and that's when it happened. Brian bolted out of the van so fast he left the whipping machine on, and she stayed behind to turn it off. When she came out of the van, the cliff was in the sea. Brian used to sell twisters for 25p. Said to sell them for £2 made him feel sick. He'd rather take the loss. Didn't mind selling them to tourists for that price though. Not a problem with that. £2.50 if they were particularly annoying. He called it the Birkenstock tax. He even used to keep a Viennetta in the freezer just in case a really posh family came along. It wasn't safe to go near the cliff, so they closed off the whole beach. And everyone had to pack into this little piece on the other side of the pier, but it wasn't as good. And with the summer being what it was, just sort of ended. Everyone had gone home. After that, there were days where the sun beat down so hot that the tarmac was too hot to walk on, but there was no one left to sell to. Why is it down to me to do it? I bet they all just want to see me mess it up. I don't remember anything about writing. All I remember about Year 9 English is P paragraphs. I do remember getting sent out for laughing, but who wouldn't when it's called a P paragraph? The cliff was just the start of it. They did the late shift the night before. The sun had shone and they made a fortune. Had chips on the way home. You couldn't shake the feeling something worse was coming. You couldn't shake the feeling something worse was coming. You couldn't shake the feeling something worse was coming. But everybody kept quiet. He died on a Saturday afternoon. His point, evidence, explain. I remember that much. Point, I was an ice cream man. Evidence, he sold ice cream. Explain, in his van, with me. On her way to the church, she thought about the time she'd driven to Margate with Brian. She sat silently and wore dark sunglasses and a tie she borrowed from her dad. She wanted to drive the van through the town and play all of his favourite songs, but her hand hovered over the volume control and she couldn't bring herself to play a tune. People dipped their heads as she drove through town. If the van hadn't been so perfectly air-conditioned, she would have been hot with her rage. There was still so much more to know.
Sometimes we wouldn't say anything until halfway through the afternoon, and I just want to scream from boredom. Getting these moves, and once I get in one, they just get worse and worse. And he'd ask me for the 11th time, what's wrong? And so I'd snap and say something like, this isn't exactly what I imagined for my life, Bri. Something equally emo/depressing. But the last time it happened, I lost it, some kids taking forever to make their choice. He didn't laugh. He just said, what more could you want than this? He could sit for hours doing nothing, just licking his third twister of the day, just sitting watching some kids try and set a bin on fire. It was really annoying sometimes, but he was always so peaceful, especially considering all the doom. Brian told you about the melting ice cream so many times he lost count. He told you that things were getting harder and that the beaches were disappearing and that the cliffs looked different to when he was a kid. And he tried telling you about the blackberries before they cut the hedgerows back, but you let them do it anyway. He tried to stop you turning the playing field into a car park. He wasn't angry, but I am. I'm sick of hearing about the cliff or the tree in the square. You've done nothing! And now it's too hot, or too cold, or too rainy, or too humid to do all the things you used to do. Some woman from the council turned up at my house the other day. I've seen her before. She gets a strawberry split about once every 2 weeks and sits and eats it in the park on her own. Sad state of affairs. She said that she was sorry for my loss and that no one from the council would be able to come to the funeral because it was the start of their annual team building week, and unfortunately it had been in the diary for months. Oh yeah, completely understand, totally get it. People like that wouldn't want to be remembered for their jobs. Most people would want to be remembered for being good to their families,
a charity, or a really funny story that also made him look like a good person. But not Brian. Brian would want to be remembered for his job. Most ice cream vans go May until September, but Brian would go February until late November if he could, if the weather let him. I see people in town looking at me like what's happened to them is worse, like what's happened to me, what's happened to them is worse than what's happened to me. But if anything, it's the other way around. I don't need you looking at me, and I definitely don't need your pity. Brian was a good man, probably the best, better than any of you. At least I know what we've lost. Been a tiny part of a lot of things. A crisp packet, a battery in an electric car, a goose. I was a leaf on a tree and then I was soil. Once, a very long time ago, I was a part of her. She was the first last one I ever was. Everything has changed since then. Now I'm at the end. Nothing left to be. She buried her coat in a freshly dug hole and put her hat out on the wall for someone to take. After an hour, she could see the hat was still there, so she rushed outside to bring it back in. She dug up her coat and washed it with a whole bottle of stain remover and hung it out on the line to dry. It was hard to imagine what would come next. Someone came to town to clear out his house. They offered to do the van too, but she said she wanted to do it herself. They said she could take whatever she wanted, but she didn't want anything. She found his wallet in the glove box. It had a £5 in it, a few faded ice lolly wrappers and some cards. Library, driving licence, Boots Advantage. That was a surprise. Brian left her the van in his will. The people in the town couldn't imagine things differently. The people in the town didn't know what they had until it was gone. The people in the town adapted, made do with what was left. The clouds are a thick blanket, trapping the damp in and keeping the heat out. It's cold, like the inside of a broom cupboard all of a sudden, but in a flash it will clear, like somebody clicked their fingers and it will be hot. Roasting, toasting, sweaty. When the sun comes out, they forget it all to begin with, the trouble they've caused. They'll slather on their creams and their oils and crack the spines of their books. A towel on the lawn, a wash on the line, behaving like normal just for a second until the rain comes again. The sea starts creeping up. The playground has scorch marks in the grass. Slowly, the seasons merge. Boiling in April, raining in August. You can't predict 2 good days in a row. You can't predict a good day from a bad one. And then it's hot. Too hot. The ice cream dribbles down their elbows before they can get back to their towels. So she drives a little closer. But eventually she finds there's nowhere left to park. All the usual bits of beach they like to sit on have been gobbled up by the sea. Everyone can see how hard she's trying to make it work. Sometimes I come down to what's left of the seafront to think about him, to try and make myself feel better, but it just makes me angry. He knew it was all going to happen, and he just let us carry on. He didn't tell us what we should do about it. Some girl with a load of badges on her jacket came up to me with a leaflet big enough to wedge a door open with and said, "How do you like the thought of being decommissioned?" Decommissioned? Once I realised she wasn't starting on me, I took a leaflet. I looked it up. Withdraw from service. Make inoperative. They usually use it for vehicles and buildings, but occasionally these days they use it for towns, just like this one. I went my whole life not hearing that word, and then suddenly I heard it once, and then I heard it everywhere. First the leaflets, then the local news, now it's on the national news. It's not just us either. When I was a kid, the only things that I thought went extinct were things that were alive ages ago. Dinosaurs. I'm talking about dinosaurs, really. I think, if we're honest with ourselves, that's what we all thought. But then they started using it for things that are alive now, or using it as a threat. They say that tigers might go extinct. That seemed impossible when I was a kid. They can't go extinct, they'll do something. And panda bears. They say panda bears are extinct now. I've never seen one anyway, so they may well not have existed in the first place, but I still don't like knowing that now I never will. I used to think that people would care when they were supposed to. I thought I burnt some bridges with my speech at the funeral, but for the first time ever, they actually seemed to take me seriously. I can't take all the credit, the Cliff did most of the heavy lifting, but I think I nudged them on their way a little bit. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but there's no denying it. And if I can see it, then they probably ought to as well. Diesel's almost impossible to get now, so I looked into making the van electric, but it was no use. The tide had started eating up the beach, and there was nowhere good left to park. I ploughed the 500 quid my granddad left me into fixing the freezer, but it wasn't enough. It was like everything just wanted to melt, and all the usual places to park, they were disappearing. The only good place was the car park for the shopping centre on the high street. It's not a nice heat anymore. People bought them out of sympathy for a while, but then they all moved on. Nobody wants an ice cream in a car park, not really. And they can't predict the weather now for love nor money. It doesn't escape me that everything I've spent the last few years learning is for nothing. Swirling the perfect whippy or hot wiring an ancient stereo system aren't exactly desirable, transferable skills. I'm basically back to where I was before, only now I'm a vegetarian. And skin. I'm glad he's not here to see it. I'm glad he doesn't know we were too late to stop it. Town can't go back now either. The tide's come too close and people can't sell their houses. When the high street flooded for the first time, some government people turned up in their 4x4s and they did all these surveys, and they reckon that in 10 more years the whole first row of houses on the front will be swallowed up, just like the beach was. Return to the sea, they called it. Like it's just what nature intended. Called a meeting for us in the village hall. I wasn't going to go, but Brian would have. I hadn't been there since my year 6 disco, and neither had anyone else, judging by the state of it. Same red and green curtains, same peeling lino on the floor, same rusted shut windows, same purple paint in the loo, same people too. Everyone I'd known forever. Most of the people talking were the ones whose houses were going to be hit first. They said it's the last 3 winters now that the sea's coming through the cracks, and last winter it happened twice. I recognised some lady from the local news. She'd been walking through her living room in waders. So people asked me how I was. Asked about Brian in the van. I hate getting too much attention from strangers, so I just said I was fine. I don't like the way they tilt their head to look at me or touch me on the arm. The meeting was too long. They spiced up the PowerPoint presentation with slide transitions, which only made it worse. Everyone was just trying their best to keep positive. When I was a kid, I used to pinch money from my nan's purse. Never more than a £5. I never take anything paper. She knew exactly what I was doing, but as long as I didn't take her fag money, she didn't say anything. There are certain things we should be able to trust always. Certain things that just aren't going to change no matter how bad it gets. A few years pass and the sun is piercing down. A blast of heat like opening the oven door. And then a cloud comes, it rains and washes them all inside again. They take their summers in hours now, not days or weeks. They're digging a pit to draw water, but it doesn't come. More time, more trouble, less ignoring to be done. They're watering their lawns in vain. Old people don't want to go outside. It's October. The edges of the town are smooth like a stone. People start putting petty things aside. Once the children started their protests, the grown-ups felt like they had to probably grow up a bit too. They started an action group which started meeting on weekends to build flood defence barriers on the seafront. Someone's son was good at Photoshop and they had him make some flyers to give out when the tourists came. The people in the town weren't perfect. The people in the town came together anyway. The people in the town took matters into their own hands, just in case anything they did could make a difference. She thinks about Brian on a Wednesday. She remembers her first day when she turned up late on purpose. She remembers the plant pot and the key ring and the twitching curtains. Decides he was probably watching all along. She still starts it for a while, the van, keeps it ticking over. She knows she can't keep it forever. She thinks about all the things she could turn it into if she wanted to. A mobile library, a camper van, coffee shop. Nothing feels as good. Nothing captures the spirit like before. You know when a story's over. Having an ice cream is as much about the spirit as the weather. If you're in the mood for one, you'll have one in the cold. Spirit's been hard to find here lately, but today I just fancied one. Can't explain why. Nan used to say, you should never leave the house without a cardigan before the end of May. But these days, our beach bags have raincoats and umbrellas in all year round. It's so different here. We're still happy most of the time. We talk about the past a lot. People who used to dodge me in the street now nod as they walk past me, so in a way it's brought us closer. Last winter, we all got evacuated in a storm, and we got to go and sit in the leisure centre in the next town over. They let us swim for free, but I've still never learned. Someone tried to put a tinfoil blanket around me, but I wanted to keep busy, so I went and played badminton with some kids from the school. We had to wait there 3 days until it passed, and everyone had to find things to do. The flat screen TV just spat out the same news cycle over and over again. And there's only so many times you could rattle a vending machine or take a walk around the tennis courts, and so we talked. We talked about how it used to be, like we'd been in a war. About the long lazy days in the summer we'd spend getting pinker by the minute on the front. We talked about how people used to get caught doing all sorts under the pier, and the woman from the chippy went a proper shade of red when that came up. We talked about sports days on the beach, and how someone tipped the milk van over and got milk all over the road. We talked about the fishing boat that got washed out to sea and washed back in 2 weeks later. He was in almost all their stories in one way or another. He did always know when to turn up and start selling. I read some graffiti on the toilet door in the village hall that said, "You die twice. The first time is when you actually die, and the second time is when someone says your name for the last time." I knew that was too deep to be someone around here who said it, so I googled it. Someone said it was the Egyptians, but someone else said it was Al Pacino. Either way, it made me think about Brian. Some people from the town helped me tow the van down to the seafront. I hadn't started it in ages, and when I did, it just spluttered and sighed and then died for good. We snaked through the streets like a procession. Took it right down onto the beach. The tide was out. I left his wallet inside. I threw his keys off the pier, but kept mine, the little chain of beads that spelled out my name still dangling from it. One day, in thousands of years, they might find it deep in the sea and excavate it. They might recover it and put it on the local news or in a museum. They might even write a little plaque to go beside it, the kind he deserves, like a proper bit of history. They'll probably do some research and find his picture on the internet. They could write about the smell of his coat, always fresh washed, or how he only wore sun cream on his forearms because they were the only bits that saw the sun, or how he closed his eyes with his face tilted up. I didn't ever think that one day I'd come here and he wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be able to find him in all the places he usually is. That soon I wouldn't be able to come here at all. That it would all be washed away. That it wasn't going to be like that forever. The quiet peacefulness with him, the whirring of the engine, the buzz of the Mr. Whippy machine, the fuzzy sound of the sea far away, that jingle, the cold breeze on the back of my neck.